and welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. Toward a two-state solution or talks for talk's sake, the Obama administration has publicly mended fences with Israel after a chill in relations. Is it enough to restart what is called the peace process, or just a strategy of endless negotiations? To discuss the prospects for peace in the Middle East, I'm joined by Robert Fisk in Cairo. He's the Middle East correspondent for The Independent and the author of numerous international bestsellers. In Jerusalem, we cross to Dan Diker, the Director of Strategic Affairs of the World Jewish Congress and a Foreign Policy Fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and another member of our Crosstalk team, Yael Nahanga. All right, gentlemen, both of you have been on the program before, so you know how it works. You can jump right in. That's Crosstalk rules. Robert Fisk, if I can go to you first. Okay, we've seen a public mending of fences with Netanyahu and Obama not a long time back. And the process, Mitchell's in the Middle East doing his little shuttle. Can the United States, I'll just be quite blunt, can the United States be a fair broker in finding some kind of solution? Because it seems to have gone on forever.
No, I don't think it can. The last time that America really complained about Israel seriously was when Eisenhower ordered the Israelis, along with the British and the French, to get out of Suez in 1956. Ever since then, the Americans basically go along with Israeli policy. In fact, if you listen to Department of State spokesmen and then you listen to Israeli spokesmen and you mix them all up, you can't tell who was which. At the end of the day, I don't believe in this business. There was a chill and then we've mended fences. I think this is for the press. At the end of the day, Israel will do what it wants to do, and when America objects, it will remind the United States of where it stands, which is it must back Israel for electoral reasons, particularly now. You know, you've got to realize that wonderful quote from Netanyahu, which a very good Israeli source of mine tells me is absolutely accurate, that when Obama first objected to further Jewish settlements on Arab land, Netanyahu turned around and said, this guy just doesn't get it, does he? Well, I think Obama gets it now. Midterm elections, be nice to Israel again, despite what happened in Gaza, the aid convoy, despite the demolition of Palestinian homes in Jerusalem, the continued building of colonies for Israelis and Israelis only on Arab land. Obama goes along with it. There's the big handshake, and that will happen. And next time there'll be a little objection from Obama, and then it'll be the next presidential elections, then the next midterm elections. And I think that we all know, and Israel knows very well, that Israel has tremendous power, which it uses in Congress and the Senate in Washington. And this means that America cannot be a fair, honest broker. The real question is, since the European Union are paying for most of this, could the European Union?
All right, let's get to that, but I want to ask Dan. Dan, is, in light of what Robert Fisk just had to say, is it in America's best interest to have such a close relationship with Israel? Because the perception, whatever the Arab street people want to define these days, doesn't see the United States as a fair broker at all. It's the same side as Israel, and that's pure and simple.
Right, it is pure and simple. In fact, the Arab world saw Barack Obama in the United States as a very fair broker back in March 2009 when Mr. Obama gave an unprecedented speech in Cairo, which I'm sure my colleague Mr. Fisk remembers well, and in which the largest gap between the Israeli public and any U.S. president was created when Mr. Obama called for the cessation of Israeli building on disputed land. I'm sure anybody who's taken a basic course in Middle East understands that Israel doesn't colonize Arab land, but in fact the land is disputed according to the very international law that the United Kingdom was involved in drafting in November 22nd, 1967, when they were the co-drafters of UN Security Council Resolution 242. But in addition to that, it's clear that the United States, and on this point I do agree with Mr. Fisk, the United States has had a very difficult time in the Middle East trying to create peace among all the parties in the Middle East. Look what happened in Iran in 1979. Look what happened in Lebanon in 1983, where America lost 300 peacekeeping soldiers when the Iranian-backed Hezbollah blew them to bits. I'm sure Mr. Fisk was in Lebanon at that time. And then the Americans have tried somewhat unsuccessfully to broker a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. The bottom line here is that the Palestinian leadership under Mr. Abbas have to agree to come to the table and talk with the state of Israel. Mr. Netanyahu, much to the surprise of the entire world, has actually reached out to Mr. Abbas as much as any left-wing liberal Israeli government has in the 62 years since Israel was created. And Mr. Abbas, for his reasons, has decided not to come to the negotiating table. I do believe that Mr. Abbas will come to the negotiating table because Mr. Obama is now pressuring Mr. Abbas. But clearly, the Palestinians have got to negotiate directly with Israel, and the United States, in fact, can play a much lower profile. If the Palestinians and Israelis get together, they can come to a peace accord, just like they did in the Oslo Accords without American interference in 1993.
Okay, Dan, you said something that Israeli spokespeople say all of the time. You used the D word, disputed. Robert Fisk, are those,
Yes.
is that territory, the West Bank and Gaza, disputed? Because that's what they say in American mainstream television. That's what Americans are told all the time.
I've just been to Israel, and I've also been in the West Bank. I've been to Israel and the West Bank in the last few weeks. Now, Area C, which is the part of the West Bank which Israel occupies, the Palestinians cannot even build a drain pipe underground there. That area, which is 60% of the 22% of Palestine that's left, is occupied by the Israelis, Israeli checkpoints, Israeli settlements. The rest, this little about 11.7%, is all the Palestinians have got left. This land is occupied, and it will continue to be. It's my view there will not be a Palestinian state. It's gone. It cannot exist in the framework that exists now unless there is an Israeli withdrawal from Area C, 60%, and there is not going to be. I am certain of that, and I don't think there's any intention of being. It is occupied, and it has gone, and that is the point. And that's what Mr. Obama cannot even admit, at least until after the next midterm elections.
Okay, Dan, you know, a lot of people just say very bluntly that I'm sorry, let me ask my question first, is that, you know, these are just talks for talk's sake, that under some circumstances the Israelis will push the rest of the Palestinians out of the West Bank because, as Robert has pointed out, more and more people have come to the conclusion that it is impossible to have a two-state solution now because there's not a second state to make.
Right. Well, first of all, there certainly can be a two-state solution, but let me just correct this egregious misstatement of fact and point out the following. When Mr. Arafat and Mr. Rabin shook hands in September of 1993 and then signed the Oslo II agreements in 1995, they actually agreed on the division of the land of Israel into what the Palestinians call the West Bank, which is the former West Bank of Jordan, into three areas, A, B, and C. So dear God, how could Area C be under occupation when Mr. Arafat himself, in an act of bilateral agreement, signed a binding agreement, according to international law, in which both Israel and the Palestinian Authority have rights to negotiate over the future of that land. And certainly Mr. Fisk and other great students of the Middle East remember that that land was occupied illegally by the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan before 1967. So how could Israel occupy land that had no prior legal sovereign owner to it? Now, as to the...
Well, I'd like to reply to that, if I may.
You certainly will.
To just
claim...
Go ahead, finish up, Dan. Go ahead.
I just wanted to finish up a point. I'd be happy to hear Mr. Yeah, the issue about whether there can be a Palestinian state, certainly there can be. In fact, Israel, when it pulled out of the Gaza Strip in August, September 2005, you know, the Palestinians could have made the Gaza Strip into the Hong Kong of the Middle East. Unfortunately, with Iranian help and the help of the Iranian, the Quds Force of the IRGC, they turned it into hell on the Mediterranean. And you have the Iranian regime to thank for that. And the people of Gaza are crying and cursing the Iranian regime because of that. In fact, when I speak to my friends in Gaza, they say it all the time. They may not say it on Russia Today because they're afraid of retribution from the Iranian-backed Hamas and Al-Qaeda affiliates in Gaza.
Okay, we'll discuss that issue a little bit. We'll discuss that issue a little bit later. Robert, you said you wanted to jump in there. Wow, the Hong Kong of the Mediterranean. I've never heard that one before. Go ahead.
Look, first of all, if you really want to justify Israel's occupation of the West Bank by referring to a dissolute old king whom the Brits put in power without any proper election, that's up to you. I don't think that's the kind of bedrock and foundation of building settlements that I'd want to advertise to viewers around the world. But the fact of the matter is that when Arafat agreed the 1995 agreement, it was also agreed there would be further Israeli retreats within Area C. Now, that agreement was brokered at Y River, and Netanyahu broke that agreement because those retreats did not happen. And that is the fact.
Okay, Dan, you want to reply to that?
No, the fact is, wait a second. The fact is that Israel lost more civilians to terrorism since signing the Oslo Agreement in 1993 than it did in the 15 years before that.
Can you answer that question? No, Dan, can you answer the question? Please answer the question. You changed the topic. Can you answer the question?
Yes. Why River? Why River? Didn't make further... that was a sound agreement.
Israel, at Wye River, At Wye River, as you remember, under Mr. Netanyahu in 1998, Israel made a pullback it made an upgrade from Area B to Area A, and Israel, because of the terrorism that had washed the streets of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, and other cities, had frozen other pullbacks because the Palestinian Authority, as is widely known by the Clinton administration and by the Bush administration after that, had made egregious violations of international law and had murdered Israelis. So I wonder whether, after the 7/7 attacks in London, whether the Brits took another look at their... I didn't hear you. What were you saying?
Go ahead. Robert, go ahead.
What was that?
So you would agree, Dan, you do agree that the 1995 agreement and then Wye River did mean further pullbacks which were not fulfilled by the Israelis?
Go ahead, Dan.
You know, both the 1993 exchange of letters, as I'm sure Mr. Fish is one of the great scholars of the Middle East is aware, was all based on the fact that there would be a complete end to Palestinian terrorism, violence, indoctrination, and incitement. And in fact, all of those four acts of terrorism, both verbal and diplomatic, as well as physical terrorism, has increased since Israel, in a great move of pacifism, of state pacifism, had conceded the Palestinian Authority.
I'm going to have to jump in here, gentlemen, to go to a break. We'll discuss more about settlements. After a break, we'll continue our discussion on talks to start talks. Stay with RT.
Welcome to the future. Seeing double, it's just 3D. Escaped from the cinema and landed in your living room. Shot on special lenses, streamed straight to your stereo display.
The life.
No glasses, no problem. Projections from the world of 3D on Technology Update here on RT. We've got the future covered.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about the so-called Middle East peace process. But before, let's see what Russians think about the Gaza blockade.
Despite loosening the Gaza blockade after the attack on the Freedom Flotilla, many say Israel's gesture is not enough. The EU's High Representative of Foreign Policy insists on a full lifting of the blockade, claiming it would allow Gazans rebuild their lives. Russia's Levada Center asked citizens if they approve of Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. 28% said they do. However, another 35% disapprove of Israel blocking cargo delivery to the region. Back to you, Peter.
Okay, if I go back to you, Robert, I mean, the Israelis always mention Oslo as a point of reference. Can you explain to my audience, what is the Palestinians got out of Oslo? Because 18 years ago, there were direct talks. Today, we don't even have direct talks. And a lot of people will claim, you see, this amazing colonization of the West Bank, what is supposed to be the second state.
Well, that is exactly, factually, what is happening. If we can go back to something Dan said, it sounds as if he's saying, you know, there was terrorism, there was incitement, so we decided to build some more settlements. Those settlements are not being built there as tents for a couple of years so Israelis can live there. They're permanent, and they are taking and eating and gobbling up the land, as the Israelis know. Are we therefore saying that the settlements are being built because there was so much terrorism? I don't think so. Indeed, Israelis who live in the settlements are more in danger of being attacked than they would be if they did live in Israel. And we know that as a fact. There are attacks and have been in Israel, but it is a fact there. When we go back to the Gaza thing, you see, you've got to look at it as a human being. The ceasefire with Hamas was actually broken in November 2008 by the Israelis. Then the rockets came in much more than they were before on towns like Sderot. Then the Israelis had the big Gaza war. And it was about 1,300, most civilians, Palestinians dead, and 13 Israelis, 2 of whom actually were Arab Israelis. Now, at an exchange rate of death of 1 to 100, the real question is, do you really think Palestinians think they can do a deal with Israel now? I doubt it very much. I don't think there's many people I meet in the Middle East as a whole, and I include Israeli friends, who really believe that is going to happen. I think we're entering a very dark period, and a dark period not just for the Palestinians, but for the Israelis, for the Iranians, for the whole region. And I think that it is a fact, as we know, that Petraeus and other senior officials in the US administration have said that what Israel does directly does affect our actions in other Muslim countries, and it has a deleterious effect. When I go to Afghanistan, why do I see Philistine written on the wall? And the people who write that shoot at American soldiers. And the question is, how long can this go on? But I think as long as Americans will want to be re-elected as president, it'll go on indefinitely, and eventually Israel will have the whole of the West Bank, and there'll be little tiny little villages for the Palestinians who are going to work for the Israelis to live there. And that's what we know. Quite a lot of Israelis in the present government of Netanyahu would rather like the West Bank. All of it.
Go ahead, Dan. Jump in there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Fisk doesn't really believe that America's position in Somalia or in Sudan, in the civil war there, or in the civil war that's been going on between the Iranian-backed Hezbollah and the Druze and the Christians in Lebanon, or with the Shiite militias in Iraq, or the Taliban in Afghanistan, have anything to do with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I mean, that's just simply patently absurd.
Oh, yes, it does.
In
yes,
fact, we know that Osama bin Laden's 1998.
Well, I mean, Dan, if I could jump in here, General Petraeus said as much, didn't he?
Well, let's.
Yes, he did.
General Petraeus
Yes, he did.
Comments to the Senate. Mr. Petraeus.
He said it, yeah.
Mr. Petraeus himself said on the record.
General Petraeus.
General Petraeus himself said on the record that his words were completely distorted by politically charged government representatives following his testimony to the Senate. And what Mr. Petraeus said, which is that if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is won, and you can check the protocols of what I'm telling you here, go to Google and check out what he said, is one of a number of different problems in the Middle East. Now, you know extremely well that, in fact, the majority, just to answer one of Mr. Fisk's misstatements of fact, that the majority of the injured, wounded, and murdered Israelis in the Intifada, after Israel made a far-reaching statehood offer in 2000, one of two, they made a second one in 2008, which was rejected, the majority of Israelis that were killed live in pre-67 Israel. And if Mr. Fisk thinks that the Israeli settlements are illegal or are not proper outside of Israel, which is absolutely not true. In fact, there are two claimants here. Israel is a claimant to its own land, the land of Israel. The Palestinians are another claimant. There happen to be 1,200,000 Palestinians living within 1967. So are we suggesting that there should be a transfer of population bilaterally, and that the Palestinians that are living in pre-67 Israel should be transferred to the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and that Judea and Samaria should be unified?
Dan, that's how you defined Israel. That may not necessarily coincide with international law. Robert, I don't think I've ever come across someone that knows the greater Middle East better than you do, all right? And I don't want to change the subject. I hate when that happens when we talk about this issue. You know the greater Middle East very well. Tell me, in your opinion, after, 34 years of living in the region, if the Palestinian issue were resolved with dignity, with justice, how would that change the face of greater Middle East politics, in your opinion?
It'd be like spraying salt water on al-Qaeda. I think al-Qaeda would start to wither, because the idea of injustice is what feeds these vicious warriors in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iraq. And at the center of that is the belief in much of the Muslim world, which Dan, of course, will disagree with, that Israel is in effect a state of the United States, and that Israel is a colonizing power, and that therefore America is. But I've just got one question to come back to. Why is Israel building more colonies for Jews and Jews only on land that does not belong to it? The West Bank was never Israeli. It's not acknowledged as Israeli by the international community. That's why all the embassies, including the American embassy, is in Tel Aviv. So why does it go on building these massive colonies on Arab land?
All right, Dan, go ahead.
Why? Why does it do it?
First of all, I have to correct you, Mr. Fisk. Israel, as you know, as a scholar of the Middle East, that the land, you cannot have an occupied land, A, when Israel has had a 2,000-year connection to that land, and B, when Mr. Arafat himself and Mr. Rabin signed a bilateral agreement in which they both recognized that there are dual claims to the same land. How can you, and you know international law, of course, because you're a scholar of the region, how can you possibly have an occupation which, by definition, is the unilateral action of a belligerent state against another state, when the land itself never had the last sovereign of that land was the Ottoman Empire, which you know very well. So how could it be that Jordan, that illegally occupied that land and then was part of the attacking party against Israel?
Go ahead, Robert, jump in there. Go ahead.
So I've got documents, photocopies of hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian documents, which go right back to the Ottomans and the British Mandate, showing that they paid taxes, they owned the land, they were the rightful landowners. I have never seen a document in parts of the West Bank except in Hebron.
You know, I have hundreds of documents.
Would you please let Robert finish?
Oh, here we go.
Go ahead, Robert, finish your point, please.
I have only seen it yeah, right. In Hebron, there are documents showing that Jews own the land, and at the pogrom in the 30s, they had to flee. But that is the only example. Everybody else legally owned the land. God did not give it to the Palestinians, I suppose. He gave it only to the Israelis. This is ridiculous. You know, you haven't answered the question, Dan. Whether you think they're two conflicting claims, why does Israel continue to build colonies for Jews and Jews only on land which belongs to Arabs?
Go ahead, Dan.
Israel exists in its own frontiers.
Well, the truth of the matter is that the truth of the matter is that you haven't. If you come to Israel, I would invite you to come to my home, and I will show you areas of Gush Etzion in which Jews were murdered in 1948, when the Jordanians again illegally took that part of the land on their way to trying to destroy Jerusalem. And I will show you hundreds of Jewish deeds to that land in which there are Jewish communities built on Jewish land. There are many deeds that Jews own, and as a matter of fact, it is a matter of official Israeli law not to build Jewish communities on privately owned land. That is a matter of fact. The vast majority of the West Bank is called state land, which means that land that has absolutely no owner. Israel has
gentlemen, I want to move forward.
And as a matter of fact, it was Israel that allowed the Palestinians.
I'd like to move forward, and I'd like to stay with you, okay? So Robert thinks a two-state solution is not viable anymore. More and more people are coming to that opinion. What is a viable state for the Palestinians if you still believe in a two-state solution? What is viable? What's fair?
I very much believe
West Bank.
I believe that there can be a two-state solution where you have a Palestinian state and a Jewish state dividing Judea and Samaria and what others call the former West Bank of Jordan. Let's remember that Israel, in order for Israel to be a viable Jewish state, it has to be able to protect itself against the most simplest of rockets that are now positioned by the Hamas and by Fatah militias in the West Bank.
Will the Palestinians be able to protect themselves, Dan? Will the Palestinians be able to protect themselves as well?
I hope so. What you should do is ask the Fatah whether hundreds of their fellow members of the Fatah who've been thrown out of windows in Gaza by the Hamas and killed in other areas of the West Bank by the Hamas will be able to be protected by their own people, from their own people, by their own people. Right now, the Israeli army, as is well known by insiders, is the only force that is protecting the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, the Jordanian monarchy in Jordan, and the Jewish people and the Israeli people who are not Jewish.
Dan, I'm going to have to jump in here. Dan, I'm going to have to jump in here. Robert, I want to give you the last word. Robert, I want to give you the last word. Go ahead. 1 minute.
Listen, first of all, Ma'ale Adumim is partly built on totally provable Arab land. I know one of the landowners there. I watched him being thrown off. I watched him going to court. In the court, they said this. He said, I would like to live in Ma'ale Adumim with the Jews. And he was told, you're not one of the people who's going to live in Ma'ale Adumim. So he was thrown off his land and went to a village where other members of his family lived, 6 miles away. And now every trace, every stone of his house has disappeared. That is simply not fair. That is not just. That is wrong. But, you know, the overall point of this is come back to it. Why is Israel continuing to build more colonies for Jews and Jews only on Arab land? Why does it go on building these colonies? Israel exists as a state.
Well,
it is legally in
Gentlemen, we've run out of time. I'd like to
get
get back together again, and we'll answer that question. Many thanks to our guests today, Robert Fisk and Dan Diker, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.
Thank you.